If you're in your 40s or even 50s and find yourself forgetting words mid-sentence, walking into a room and having no idea why, or reading the same paragraph in a book over and over and over again, what you're experiencing is the very real brain changes that begin in perimenopause. And in my opinion, it's one of the most frustrating parts of this hormonal transition. I see this constantly with clients, and I've experienced it myself, especially in my late 30s. There were moments when I genuinely thought, how can I keep running a business, speaking, teaching, when I can't even finish a freaking sentence? I would lose words. I'd forget names. I was struggling to focus really bad. And for somebody who's always been pretty sharp and articulate, that was scary. And full transparency, even with all the strategies and support that I put into place over the last 5 to 6 years, my brain now at 43 is definitely not the same as it used to be. So what's the deal? Estrogen is a brain hormone. It plays a big role in your memory, your focus, your verbal fluency, mood regulation, and how your brain uses glucose for fuel. As estrogen starts to fluctuate wildly, as it does in perimenopause, and eventually decline, your brain has to adapt. And that's when these symptoms show up, like brain fog, forgetfulness, difficulty concentrating, feeling mentally slower. And then there's progesterone, our calming hormone, which supports GABA, our primary calming neurotransmitter. So with estrogen fluctuating, progesterone dropping, it can feel like you're losing your mind at times, right? And many women in perimenopause become more anxious, more fearful, more introverted. I know that's been really true for me. I'm wanting a lot of alone time, less social, and more prone to rumination and spiraling thoughts. We worry about things beyond our control. Some women even tell me they're afraid to leave their house, travel, they're scared to drive, and even notice that they've become really indecisive. They get very overwhelmed when they have to make a decision about something. And what I've noticed clinically over and over is that all those symptoms are also a sign that the nervous system is struggling and there are nutritional imbalances. It's never just about hormones, although they play a really big role. So when I see intense fear, anxiety, spiraling thoughts, I see low progesterone, fluctuating estrogen, and a nervous system and body in need of physiological support. Adequate progesterone, not tiny doses, can be profoundly stabilizing for the brain, as well as estrogen. Yes, in perimenopause, yes, even if you're still cycling. I see a lot of providers hesitate to give women in perimenopause estrogen. And I really believe that it's doing such a disservice to a lot of these women when they're only prescribing progesterone and or testosterone and totally ignoring the estrogen piece. It really is very brain supportive. And when it comes to testosterone, while we often think of it as a male hormone, women need it for focus, motivation, and mental clarity. So when testosterone drops, many women notice that they feel less driven and more scattered. So when a lot of women start testosterone, they say that their brain fog improves. Now, while I love that there's more awareness around testosterone hormone therapy, specifically for women, my only gripe, and I don't even know if gripe is the right word to use, is that it can take a long time to feel the benefits for a lot of women, myself included. And oftentimes you need a higher dose, but when you increase it, it can be accompanied by androgenic symptoms like acne, oily hair, oily skin, more hair everywhere. I know I feel like I have to constantly shave because I'm currently at a slightly higher dose than I've been in the past in attempt to reap the systemic benefits, because I was not seeing those benefits at a lower dose. And I've been on testosterone for several years at different doses, different application sites, but the jury is still out, at least for me. But maybe it works wonders for you. Now, we also have to talk about culture. We have normalized constant multitasking and overstimulation. We could have gotten away with that in our 20s and 30s, but in perimenopause, our brains simply don't tolerate it in the same way. Focus becomes much harder. Our brain is less resilient to chaos. And don't get me started on social media. It is bad news for our brains. I often ask clients, how much time are you spending on there? I don't spend a lot of time on social media myself, especially now. Years ago, I was a little more present on there because I have a business. But, My days are busy, and when I have downtime, I'm either outside, I'm moving my body, I'm connecting with Mike or family or friends, I read, or I just rest and do nothing. I know, imagine that. We don't allow ourselves to be bored anymore. We have to occupy every minute of every day. And it's no wonder why our nervous systems are fried. That constant communication with others, whether it's texting, emailing, or group chats, that's not connection. That's codependency. So if you want to support your brain health and overall health, you cannot overlook how you're spending your time and energy every day. Do you have solid boundaries in place? If not, start there. I also want to zoom out and talk about our work culture, especially for women. We live in a culture that rewards constant productivity and availability. Many of us got really good at that in our 20s and 30s. But in perimenopause, our brain and nervous system often stop tolerating that pace. I had to look at this myself. I have shared on previous episodes when I started my business over 10 years ago, I was working more than I ever did, trying to prove myself, hit income goals, manage clients, manage a team, create tons of content for social media. That alone can feel like a job. But at some point, it wasn't sustainable for me. I had to hire support. I had to reassess how I was working and spending my days, what I was focusing my time on. Because you can eat perfectly, you can take HRT, you can do all the right things, but if you're running on empty and you're available 24/7, saying yes to everyone and everything, your nervous system is going to push back and your brain is going to suffer. It's not about giving up ambition, quitting your job, and going to live on some remote island. Although that sounds really appealing some days, but it's really about living differently, choosing to live differently, which may feel counterculture. Simplifying and slowing down where you can becomes non-negotiable in midlife, in my opinion. Now, when it comes to supplements, I'm a fan of testing, not guessing or taking random things. But if you're really feeling stressed right now and like you cannot handle everything that life is throwing at you, I'm going to link to a supplement in the show notes by Microbiome Labs, a company that I really like that I use personally and with clients. Their product is called Zen Biome Cope. It combines a well-researched psychobiotic, B vitamins, and saffron to provide targeted support for coping with day-to-day stressors and mood changes. So if you're stressed, go check that out in the show notes. Now, another concern that I hear from women is this dementia or Alzheimer's, especially if they have a family history of that? Now, Alzheimer's and dementia are multifactorial. Genetics do play a small role, but metabolic health really matters. So does blood sugar regulation. And then inflammation, nutrient status, and of course, hormones all factor into that. Research does suggest that Alzheimer's disease is a form of type 3 diabetes, representing a state of insulin resistance in the brain, which disrupts glucose metabolism, and that's going to fuel neurodegeneration. And that brings us to the basics: consuming adequate protein for your needs, healthy fats, quality carbs, stabilizing your blood sugar, optimizing your minerals and nutrients, and of course, optimizing your hormones. Your brain needs fuel and hormone signaling in order to function well. This is why I'm such a strong advocate for hormone replacement starting in your 40s, not because it's some magic fix, but because you don't need to suffer, and prevention does matter. We worry so much about aging, yet a lot of women are terrified of the very tools that could protect their brain long term. For me, supporting my hormones, changing how I eat, addressing mineral depletion, calming my nervous system, and really simplifying my life has changed so much for me. My focus has improved, my confidence is way better, and my brain finally feels like mine again. And this is the work that we do in the perimenopause method, supporting your brain, your nervous system, your metabolic health, and your hormones together, not in isolation. Look, your brain is changing, but with the right support, you can feel good, yes, even in perimenopause. So if this episode resonated with you, apply to work with us so that we can support you during this time, and make sure you share this episode with a friend. The more awareness around perimenopause, the better. I'll see you soon. If you're someone who relies on coffee, but have noticed it's making you more anxious, jittery, or wired, especially in perimenopause, it may be worth looking at an alternative. I've been drinking matcha for decades and recently started using matcha nude. I really like the quality, and it gives you more stable, sustained energy without the spike and crash that you often get from coffee. It also has L-theanine, which helps support a calmer, more focused state, something a lot of women need in this phase of life. It's an easy swap to make, and I've linked it in the show notes if you want to try it yourself. The information provided is for educational and informational purposes only. I am not, nor do I act as a doctor or any other medical professional. I am not providing healthcare, medical services, or attempting to diagnose, treat, prevent, or cure any physical, mental, or emotional disease or condition. The information shared is not intended to be a substitute for the professional medical advice provided by your own medical or mental health provider.